Hi everyone. Yes, I'm Sandra Kopljar. I'm an architect, senior lecturer at the Department of Architecture and Built Environment here at Lund University. For 9 months, 9 researchers from Lund University, Aarhus University, and Aalborg University in Denmark were part of an interdisciplinary group working with a project called Sound of Democracy at the Püffendorf Institute of Advanced Studies here at Lund University. So I represent 9 people standing here. Phil, you've met today. Mark Grimshaw Aagaard from Aalborg University was a guest researcher with our theme. Clara Gustafsson from Department of Business Administration. She was here earlier, but I think she left. Marie Kolja Höjlund from Aarhus University was also a guest researcher. Then there's me, Sanne Krogroth, we all know. Christopher, you also met. Dalia Mukta Landgren from Political Science here at Lund University. And Enrico Ronchi from Division of Fire Safety, who is over there. So a result of our discussions is the audio paper which you are going to listen to. That was previously presented, as I think Sanne mentioned, at the Internoise conference in France this August. The project's aim is to interrogate democratic mechanisms, with the main question being how everyday sound environments support, reflect, and deflect democratic values. And research on democracy investigates questions such as how is power allocated between different actors, how is expert knowledge democratized, and here sound we found has a particularly disobedient quality. It does not obey visual, legal, or ownership borders. And everyday effects and use of sound dissolve and disrespect disciplinary boundaries where sound is can form its own territory and rules. And with this audio paper, our aim is to illustrate how democratic values are reflected in the soundscape standards, standards which are increasingly used to categorize, govern, and control. They're also tools to assess and characterize. And as policy tools, they raise democratic questions relating to who developed them and when and how they are used. And the audio paper format made it possible to use the questions from the standards in a real-world setting, that is in Hyllie, in the Emporia shopping mall in Malmö. And through this investigate how democratic values appear in the standards through applying them in a real-world situation. So
reflekterar alla mina sånger, det är iskallt. Vite kommer, räcker pissign. Om du är redo för beef, det blir pinsamt. Jag levererar hit som det bilbrand. Det är bara politik, jag är frilans. Det är mycket politik, håller distans.
Vi hämtar han, jag känner igen.
We fetch him, I know this. We say directly to him, you need to leave, because this is not okay.
This is the voice of a Swedish security guard working in Emporia, one of Sweden's largest shopping malls situated in Malmö. He is describing how he stopped a guy walking with a large mobile sound box.
We are a team of researchers who visited a shopping mall to investigate the democratic implications of trying to regulate sound in public space. And what is the sound of democracy? Regulating sound in public spaces can have democratic implications. Through the application of the standard series on soundscapes from the International Standards Organization, the ISO, we investigate democratic values in the governing of sound environments. More specifically, this audio paper seeks to tell the story of the ISO standard series number 12913 through applying them in a pseudo-public space. We ask how the standard relates to democracy. Our work is guided by these 2 questions. What power dynamics are revealed through applying the soundscape standards, both in the standards themselves and in pseudo-public spaces?
What assumptions on behavior and democratic agency can be identified through the application of these standards?
We are hearing sound bits from our field trips in the Emporia shopping mall in Malmö, Sweden during the spring of 2024. When Emporia first opened in 2012, with its award-winning sonic branding and sound design, it was the largest shopping center in Sweden, and it remains one of the largest in Europe. Shopping malls like Emporia are interesting because they are ambiguous in terms of their public and democratic role. But are they public spaces? Are they private? And who actually has the agency to control their soundscapes?
I understand that everybody has to do something, and I'm in a public place, so I cannot say about it. But sometimes people has to control themselves also and think about surrounding and other people.
Our field trips in Emporia included sound walks, decibel and ultrasound measurements, field recordings, questionnaires based on the soundscape ISO standard, and interviews with employees.
C3.3 Interview Guideline, Method C, Section C. Experiences with sounds in life. Question 1. Are there sounds that you like very, little, or not at all?
This question is taken from the ISO methodology to assess soundscapes, here applied in the interview.
Sound in your life?
Yeah.
Are there sounds that you like a lot or not at all? Do you have any particular sounds that you
Yeah,
love
all
or hate?
high sounds I cannot handle because I have a hearing problem.
Okay.
Yeah, I worked in nightclubs before, so yeah.
But what is an ISO standard? The ISO defines standards as
the distilled wisdom of people with expertise in their subject matter and who know the needs of the organizations they represent.
an ISO standard that defines soundscapes was published in 2014, providing requirements, specifications, and guidelines to ensure soundscape processes are fit for the purpose. 2 additional parts were published in 2018 and 2019, explaining the methods of data collection and reporting on soundscapes by combining interviews, sound walks, and physical measurements.
It was those methods we applied in Emporia. Here we meet the security guard again.
Stör mig så utgår jag för att det stör allmänheten. Det är lite så jag jobbar, vi flesta jobbar så. När det sticker ut för mycket, då är det något som får man säga till. Vi pratar högt.
There are no rules. I decide that myself. That's how I and most people work. Sound must not stand out too much. If you talk loudly, you've got to go out.
But how does this relate to democracy? Few concepts are more contested than democracy. Democracy is generally considered to be both a way to make decisions, such as voting and representation, but democracy can also be the promotion of a number of values, such as freedom and justice. Queries can be related to sound, democracy, and standards.
How should standards of sound be decided on, and whose voice should be heard and how?
Is freedom enabled through sounds and the regulation?
Are sound-related regulatory frameworks just or fair?
Vinter kommer, räcker pissign. Om du är rädd för beef, det blir pinsam. Jag levererar hit som det bilbrand. Det är bara politik, jag är frilans. Det är mycket politik, håller distans. Det är min chans, yeah. 10 000 timmar, det står längst bak i listan. Piraterna gisslan, yeah. Det är många som försöker, ni alla är på låtsas. Det här är på riktigt.
In our first field trip to Emporia, we used ISO questionnaires and sound walks. Here we identified a variety of sounds where the constant sound of escalators, music from the stores, and the award-winning sound designs such as birds and water sounds in the bathroom were among the most significant. questionnaire responses indicated a moderate loudness level with dominance of human-made sounds and mechanical noise, including ventilation drones, escalator noise, and store music. In our second field trip, we mainly focused on interviews with employees.
We have decided not to.
Decided not to.
Yeah, because people need the quiet time.
Were you part of that decision?
And I think no, we were discussed. We had music before, but in the company we decided not to have because we need to talk to our customers so much that if you need a different sound to kind of voice over, it's not good.
Yeah. But that was like a management decision, or they asked
management decision. Okay. They asked us because we had the music, and so together with them we decided on not having it anymore.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
We hear here an employee in a craft store reflecting on the policy of not playing music in the store, which the management and the employees commonly have agreed upon. During our visits, we observed that people reacted in different ways towards the sound and behavior of different groups of citizens, depending on their age or their language. Through our interview, we could identify inconsistencies across different spaces, leaving individual employers, employees, or others to regulate the soundscape themselves. This gives the individual, for instance a private security guard, to take upon a lot of power.
Power dynamics also play a role in the standards themselves. This relates to their application in relation to the characteristics of the assessors, and it leads to an interesting question about distribution of power at all levels. For instance, who should design, apply, or enforce the standards? The power dynamics of the standards tend to treat the interviewees more as listeners than as sound makers. The interview questions and the ISO methodology focus largely on how people are affected by the sound and do not bring light to how people can be empowered to generate sound or how they actively can make decisions about the soundscape.
C3.3 Interview Guideline, Method C, Section C, Experiences with Sounds in Life. Question 2. What sounds do you have to deal with in your professional life? Section G. Effects of various kinds of sounds upon moods and experience. Question 5. Do you feel that sound exposure can lead to health problems for you personally?
When the interviewees are given an active role in the methodology in the standards, it is mostly about how they can avoid being exposed to sound, rather than making sound. The questionnaire never stresses the interviewer's ability or need to make sound themselves.
Section I. Question 1. What actions are you taking to hide from or avoid unwanted sounds?
And when there is an active role to improve the soundscape, the agency is not allocated to the individual citizen, but to some other institutional power.
Section I. Question 2. What actions for improving sound conditions do you expect from your landlord, your neighbours, the municipal authorities, the government?
For this reason, we decided to add additional questions in the interviews to learn about the participants' reflection on behavior and agency, an aspect that would not be reflected upon using the ISO interview template.
Vad skulle du vilja göra för ljud om du fick välja själv?
What kind of sound would you make if you could choose yourself?
I would play music because the customers like it. It makes it cozy here.
What do you think about other people making sound? For instance, musicians or people playing music in their headphones.
Well, this is cool.
So, to sum up, what is the sound of democracy? Can democracy be sonic, and is it possible, or even desirable, to democratize sound? This audio paper hopes to ignite a conversation about the relation between sound and democracy. We recognize that this is a relation that defies oversimplification, but we think that it is still essential to explore this relation, particularly considering contemporary challenges to democracy, as well as justice, health, and care for all species. This audio paper is a first attempt to explore this relation in an interdisciplinary way, and it shows two conclusions regarding power dynamics and assumptions on behavior and agency. First, applying the soundscape standards, our empirical material indicates that the responsibility for assessing and regulating sounds in pseudo-public space is lacking. This leaves people to regulate the soundscape themselves. It results in a power dynamic where certain actors, like the security guard we interviewed, take on the responsibility and right to control the soundscape, while other actors instead take responsibility for the soundscape by regulating themselves. Is this a democratic power dynamic? Second, our analysis revealed that the point of departure of the standards is the listener. This listener is assumed to be a passive receiver subjected to sound and merely passively affected by the soundscape. They are framed as detached from the soundscape that they are asked to assess, rather than agents who make sound and co-produce the soundscape they are part of. The soundscape standards tend to prioritize listeners rather than sound makers. Are the standards aiming for a democracy of passive listeners? What about empowering a democracy of active sound makers, of speakers? Vi
kan låna bara med de tror att jag är offside. Häng på rätta linjen med de tror att jag är offside. Vem är de, vem är du, vem är som mig? Vem är de, vem är du, vem är som mig? Vi kan låna bara med de tror att jag är offside. Häng på rätta linjen med